Now, I believe we do have Chief Investigator David Hammer outside of federal court. David, this had to be just an incredible scene inside the courtroom. Can you describe it for us, and what more can you tell us about this indictment?
Absolutely, Katie. It was a historic moment. We have never had a sitting mayor indicted and charged with federal crimes while still in office. Obviously, we had Mayor Ray Nagin, who served from 2002 to 2010, who was indicted in 2013 and then convicted in 2014. Never before have we seen a sitting mayor. And now, of course, Mayor LaToya Cantrell has been indicted by a federal grand jury. The grand jury foreperson, Raymond Duplessis, who was the same foreperson who returned the indictment against Jeffrey Vappie last year, he brought a new indictment against both Vappie and Cantrell. That's all we know at this point. We don't have the details of the indictment. I know you and Mike have been talking about these possibilities that relate to what we already know from the Vappie indictment last year. What we do know or are pretty certain of is that this does not necessarily relate in any way to the charges that were filed last year against Randy Farrell, an inspector who was charged with bribing the mayor. That does not appear to be a part of this because it is attached to a new indictment of Jeffrey Vappie. Again, the courtroom was packed. Everybody was getting ready to hear the regular docket in front of Magistrate Judge Eva Dossier. None of those cases were heard. It was just the prosecutors, Nick Moses and Jordan Ginsburg, and the grand jury foreperson coming in, handing up the indictment, and then they adjourned that section of the court. So it was all focused on this indictment of Mayor LaToya Cantrell, this historic indictment, Katie.
David, any idea if these new charges, what they might be against Jeffrey Vappie? I mean, we know that, as you mentioned, and as we've been talking about, he already has a list of charges against him. So what might these new charges be? Any idea?
All we can do is speculate because of what we know surrounding it, that involves these charges that he's already facing of fraud, specifically related to his timesheets and whether he was claiming time and again, these are just charges, these are just allegations at this point, but the allegations that we already know went against Jeffrey Vappie were that he was claiming time when he should have been working as the bodyguard for the mayor, and was actually spending time with her doing things that were not part of his job description. And what you've already discussed with Mike is about these concerns that then part of that scheme, or a potential, that there was part of a scheme to cover up the fact that they were also involved in this Ambrose situation where they were looking at those detailed documents and information that they were not supposed to access against Ambrose, a part of what Mayor Cantrell then later charged against Ambrose for stalking and all of that.
We think that it's possibly related to that. I think those details are all going to come out as soon as we get our hands on a copy of that indictment. And we do have staffers that are inside the federal court. They're trying and waiting to see, what is going to happen with the actual indictment, so that we can give people more details out there about exactly what is happening. Now, David, you've been covering this since 2022. You mentioned that there is this Randy Farrell situation as well. Why do we see this particular indictment happening today? Can you talk about the grand jury that's now wrapping up and the timing of that?
Yeah, that's a very good point, Katie. The reason that this would potentially come now is not because of any statute of limitations, we don't believe, but because there was a grand jury convened in January of 2024. And those grand juries sit for 6-month periods that can be extended twice. We believe that it was extended 2 times because we see the same grand jurors. As I said before, the same grand jury foreperson who returned the indictment against Jeffrey Vappie last year was the same one who returned this indictment. That grand jury is wrapping up now because this would be the 18th month, meaning that it has served 3 6 6-month terms. And that would be the end of this grand jury. Last week, we actually saw a new grand jury come in and get seated to move forward with any federal investigations, criminal investigations. So if they didn't finish it up now, then they would have to essentially start over with the case with a new set of grand jurors who had not heard all of the evidence that they've been gathering. And as you mentioned, this started back in 2022. We broke the story that there was an investigation into Mayor Cantrell's image consultant, Tanya Haynes, whether she was providing things of value to the mayor, including dresses and hair styling and all of that could have been part of a corruption case, could have been things of value that she received because of her position as mayor. Now, that has never been charged. There have been no criminal charges stemming from that part of the investigation, but we do know that those subpoenas were issued back in 2022. Then fast forward 2024, you had the indictment of Randy Farrell, who was an inspector, a private inspector who owned the biggest private third-party building and construction inspector in the area, had huge amounts of business from the city of New Orleans, millions of dollars in business. In fact, that was in jeopardy because a person working for the city, Jennifer Cecil, was investigating him, and that led to him allegedly lobbying the mayor and giving the mayor things of value to try to get her to get rid of Jennifer Cecil. Jennifer Cecil was then fired or dismissed around that time. And then Randy Farrell continued, according to the indictment, allegedly continued to receive the benefit of that for years until late 2023. So that was something where we thought there might be charges stemming from that because the mayor was named explicitly as public official 1 in that indictment as having received bribes in exchange for public acts. She has not been charged, as far as we know, with anything related to that alleged scheme. She has been charged in relation to an alleged scheme with her former bodyguard, Jeffrey Vappy. Both of them were named in this indictment, this new indictment that appears to be separate from the indictment that's already put against Jeffrey Vappy last year, where he's still awaiting trial. That trial is set for January. The question is, will those two cases be married together? Will they be tried together? That's some things that we're going to be finding out as soon as we can actually see the contents of the indictment.
You know, David, it would be interesting if this is related to those same questions about his wire fraud and it's a separate indictment. So that leads me to think that quite possibly this is something completely different.
That's a good thought, Katie. I would make the same assumption. Again, we want to be very clear. We don't know that. We want to make sure that we have that confirmed before we report anything.
Yes.
But as you say, it was not reported as a superseding indictment. If they were charging Vappy with additional crimes and part of the same scheme as he was charged with the fraud and the wire fraud, then you would think that that would be a superseding indictment and adding Mayor LaToya Cantrell as a co-conspirator in that case. That's not what it was read out as. Again, very few details were given. Judge Ava Dossier asked for those, for the grand jury foreperson to confirm that there was a quorum of the 16 members of the grand jury present, that at least 12 of them voted to indict, and that they went ahead and indicted without any outside influence when they did so. He confirmed all of those things, and Judge Dossier read that the indictment was the United States of America versus Jeffrey Vappy and LaToya Cantrell, and that is all we know at this point.